The sun, a generous, golden orb, spilled into my kitchen, painting the worn linoleum floor in hues of warmth. It was a beautiful Tuesday, the kind of day that usually filled my 75th year with quiet contentment. But today, the beauty felt like a thin veil over a simmering cauldron of anticipation and, I confess, a faint, trembling hope. My hands, marked by the roadmap of a long life lived fully and without reservation, moved with a practiced rhythm. They'd kneaded dough for countless loaves of bread, stitched 1,000 tears in fabric, wiped away tears from faces I cherished, and stirred pots of nourishment that had sustained generations. Today, these hands, though arthritic at the knuckles, were engaged in a symphony of preparation. I was making my famous collard greens, a recipe whispered down through generations of Johnson women, each leaf massaged with smoked turkey, slow-cooked until it practically melted on the tongue, then brightened with a splash of apple cider vinegar that cut through the richness like a joyful laugh. The scent, deep and earthy, mingled with the sharp, almost peppery aroma of fried chicken, each piece golden brown and crisp, seasoned with a secret blend of herbs and spices that no store-bought mix could ever replicate. My son, David, bless his heart, always said he could smell my fried chicken from a mile away and that it tasted like pure home. My granddaughter, Sarah, with her bright, intelligent eyes, adored my collards, insisting they were magic greens that made her smarter. These thoughts, these small, cherished memories, were the fuel for my efforts. My small, comfortable home, nestled amongst other similar houses on Maple Street, was usually a sanctuary of peaceful solitude. But today, it was transformed into a bustling hub of unseen activity. Every surface gleamed. I had spent the past 3 days, from sunup until my old bones cried for rest, meticulously cleaning. The dust bunnies, those sneaky inhabitants of forgotten corners, had been vanquished. The windows, through which I had watched seasons change and children grow, were spotless, allowing the morning light to flood every room. The mahogany dining table, a silent witness to countless family dinners, triumphs, and quiet conversations, was polished to a mirror sheen. On it, I carefully spread the delicate lace tablecloth, a priceless heirloom crocheted by my own mother. Each intricate stitch was a silent testament to her enduring love, a connection across time that always brought a lump to my throat. It wasn't just fabric, it was history, legacy, and boundless affection. The sweet potato pie, a glorious, 3-layered testament to Southern culinary tradition, sat cooling on the counter, its golden crust hinting at the creamy, spiced filling within. This wasn't just any recipe, it was from my great-grandmother, a woman whose strength and resilience had inspired me my entire life. Each pecan on top was perfectly toasted, caramelized to a satisfying crunch. Beside it, my cornbread, light as a cloud yet wonderfully substantial, released its comforting, almost buttery scent into the air. I had even, with a gentle groan of protest from my lower back, managed to inflate a dozen brightly colored balloons. They bobbed cheerfully in the living room, a vibrant, silent promise of celebration. This was going to be a day of joy, togetherness, and heartfelt connection. I had meticulously planned this day for months. My 75th birthday. A quarter of a century lived beyond half 100. It felt significant, a moment to pause and gather the threads of my life, to share the warmth of family. I had sent out the invitations weeks ago, beautifully handwritten cards, each one crafted with care and a personal touch. My 75th, I had inscribed, a simple gathering of hearts, celebrating the blessings of family. I hadn't asked for gifts. My home was already overflowing with memories and a lifetime of treasures. All I desired was their presence, their laughter filling these familiar rooms, their voices mingling with mine. That, for me, was the most precious gift of all. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery oranges and soft purples, a subtle tremor of unease began to ripple through me. The old mantel clock, a cherished wedding gift from my beloved husband, its brass hands polished to a warm glow, ticked with an almost unnerving solemnity. 4 o'clock. The time I had specified on the invitations. I straightened the lace curtain, peeking out the window. Nothing. No cars pulling into the driveway, no familiar faces approaching the porch. My heart, which had been singing with anticipation just moments before, began to falter, its rhythm growing erratic. 4:30. 5. The collard greens, once steaming invitingly, now sat cooling, a dull sheen replacing their vibrant luster. The fried chicken, once irresistibly crispy, was losing its delightful crunch, its allure fading with each passing minute. My carefully set table, so inviting just an hour ago, now looked like a still life, beautiful yet terribly inanimate. I found myself pacing the length of my small living room, from the faded floral armchair to the polished piano, its keys silent, longing for the touch of Sarah's eager fingers. Each minute that passed without a sign of life outside my door chipped away at the fragile shell of my hope. I tried to rationalize it away. Traffic, of course. A sudden emergency. Perhaps they were coordinating a grand, surprise entrance. My logical mind, honed by years of practical problem-solving, desperately searched for plausible explanations. But deep within, a cold, insidious truth began to unfurl its icy tendrils. The silence was too profound, too absolute. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it was the absence of life, of the joyous chaos I had so eagerly anticipated. The brightly colored balloons, once symbols of celebration, now seemed to mock me with their cheerful bobbing, their vibrant hues screaming in the face of the encroaching gloom. They were a cruel reminder of the party that wasn't. My old rotary phone, usually a steady source of cheerful chatter and buzzing notifications from family group chats, remained stubbornly, unnervingly silent. I picked it up, my fingers, usually so nimble, fumbling clumsily with the familiar device. I checked the call log. No missed calls. No unread messages. No happy birthday, mama, or grandma, we're on our way. It was as if the world, and more importantly, my family, had simply forgotten I existed. The thought was not just a thought, it was a physical blow, a searing brand against my very soul. Eliza May Johnson, who had dedicated every fiber of my being to them, who had sacrificed my own youthful ambitions and dreams for their education, their comfort, their happiness, I was simply forgotten. The bitterness, a raw, acrid taste, filled my mouth, far more potent than any seasoning I had added to my greens. It was an insult that cut deeper than any physical wound, gnawing at the very core of my being. I thought of all the times I had put them first, always. When David, my only son, struggled to find a decent job after college, I hadn't hesitated to open my home and my meager savings to him. I never once asked for repayment, finding my reward in the quiet relief that washed over his face. When Sarah, my sweet granddaughter, suffered from a particularly nasty bout of the flu, I spent sleepless nights by her bedside, humming old spirituals and gently wiping her feverish brow, while her parents, David and Maria, enjoyed a much-needed vacation they insisted they deserved. My door had always been open to them, my advice freely given, my love unconditional, boundless, and unwavering. And now, on the day that marked 3/4 of a century of that steadfast, unyielding dedication, I was utterly, unequivocally alone. A fresh wave of hot, salty tears, unbidden and unstoppable, blurred my vision. They weren't just tears of sadness, the kind that bring a quiet release. No, these were tears of raw, incandescent rage. Rage at the ingratitude, at the sheer audacity of their neglect. Rage at the chilling silence that filled my meticulously prepared home. Rage at myself for somehow allowing this to happen, for being so foolish as to expect anything different. Had I been so naive, so blind to their true natures, to the subtle shifts in their affections, to the growing self-centeredness that had begun to overshadow their gratitude? Had my love, so freely given, been so readily taken for granted, to the point where my very existence, especially on a day meant for celebration, became an inconvenience, an afterthought, a burden they simply chose to ignore? The once comforting silence of my home now felt like a vast, echoing prison, amplifying the emptiness in my heart. The uneaten food on the dining table, once a symbol of my boundless love and generosity, now mocked me with its untouched abundance. Each dish, prepared with such care, such hope, felt like a silent, bitter accusation. I sank slowly into my favorite armchair, the one with the faded but still vibrant floral pattern, its soft cushions offering little comfort to the tumultuous storm within me. I stared blankly at the unmoving, indifferent hands of the mantel clock. 6 o'clock. 7. The darkness outside, now a thick, impenetrable blanket, mirrored the growing, suffocating darkness within me. The rage, far from subsiding, had not only solidified but had begun to morph. It was no longer a hot, blinding fury. It was now a cold, hard, crystalline resolve. This was not just about a forgotten birthday, a missed meal, or a slight against an old woman. This was about respect. This was about dignity. This was about my worth, a worth they had so carelessly trampled underfoot, as if I were nothing more than a forgotten piece of furniture. But I was not just an old woman with a broken heart. I was Eliza May Johnson, a woman forged in the crucible of hardship, seasoned by life's trials, and strengthened by a spirit that had faced down far greater adversities than this. I was far from broken. There was a fire, yes, but it was no longer merely a destructive blaze. It was a controlled, powerful inferno, long dormant, now rekindled in the depths of my soul. A fire of purpose, of unwavering determination that would not be easily extinguished. And they, my dear family, those who had chosen to forget, to neglect, to dismiss, were about to learn a profound, unforgettable lesson. A lesson in the true cost of their callous indifference. The game, I realized with a chilling clarity, was far from over. It had, in fact, just begun. The days that followed my 75th birthday felt like an extended, excruciating echo of that silent evening. The untouched dishes on the dining table, though eventually put away, haunted me. Each empty chair at the polished mahogany table seemed to mock my carefully laid plans, my earnest hopes. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself that perhaps something truly catastrophic had happened, some unforeseen event that prevented them all from reaching out. But the insidious tendrils of doubt and betrayal had already taken root in my heart, choking out the last vestiges of naive optimism. I picked up the phone countless times, hovering my finger over David's number, then Sarah's, then Maria's, but each time I pulled back. What would I say? Why didn't you come? The question hung heavy in the air, weighted with the unspoken accusation that I couldn't bring myself to voice. To do so would be to acknowledge the depth of the wound, to invite a dismissive excuse that would only deepen the sting. The silence from their end was deafening. No calls the next day. No, sorry we missed it, Mama, texts. Nothing. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist in their world. This wasn't just forgetfulness. This was an active, deliberate form of emotional neglect. It was a cold shoulder turned so completely that it felt like a deliberate act of erasure. My mind replayed every interaction, searching for a clue, a justification for such profound indifference. Had I become a burden? Was my presence so inconsequential that I could simply be blotted out of their lives without a second thought? The questions churned in my mind, a relentless, painful vortex. The true weight of their disrespect became glaringly apparent a few weeks later. I received a text message from David, brief and devoid of any warmth. Mom, Sarah's graduation party is next Saturday. We're keeping it small, just close friends. Don't worry about coming out, it'll be a late night. My heart plummeted. Sarah's high school graduation. My brilliant Sarah, who I had tutored through countless algebra problems, whose essays I had meticulously proofread, whose dreams of attending Spelman College I had encouraged with every fiber of my being. And I, her grandmother, her lifelong supporter, was explicitly told not to come. Just close friends. That phrase twisted the knife deeper than any insult. Was I not family? Was 75 years of love and devotion less valuable than a casual acquaintance? The justification, it'll be a late night, was a flimsy veil over the truth. They simply did not want me there. The implication was clear. I, an old woman, would be a burden, a damper on their youthful revelry. I would be too slow, too fragile, too old. The sting of this exclusion was sharper than the birthday snub. The birthday had been about me. This was about her. Sarah, my granddaughter, whom I adored. To be denied the joy of witnessing her triumph, of celebrating this pivotal moment in her life, was an agony almost too great to bear. This was not merely an oversight, it was a deliberate social isolation, a calculated move to push me further to the periphery of their lives. I remembered the countless hours I had spent with Sarah when she was younger. David and Maria were often busy with their careers, and I was always there to pick her up from school, to make her favorite snacks, to listen to her dreams and fears. I had taught her how to bake my sweet potato pie, her small hands sticky with molasses, her eyes wide with wonder. I had taught her about our family history, about the struggles and triumphs of our ancestors, instilling in her a sense of pride and resilience. Now, all that seemed to count for nothing. My contribution, my presence, my very existence, was deemed inconvenient. The next few months brought a slow, agonizing drip of similar slights. Maria, my daughter-in-law, who had once been so eager for my advice on gardening, suddenly became evasive. "Oh, Mama Eliza, we've got it handled," she'd say, brushing me off when I offered to help with the new rose bushes. David, always quick with a hug and a "love you, Mama," started cutting our phone calls short. "Gotta run, Mom, busy day." Their visits, once a weekly ritual, dwindled to once a month, then once every few months. Each canceled visit, each clipped phone call, each unspoken dismissal piled onto the growing mountain of my hurt. It was a subtle but relentless campaign of emotional detachment. One afternoon, a letter arrived from my bank, forwarded from an old address. It was a statement for a relatively small, but significant, online purchase. My immediate thought was identity theft, but as I looked closer, the recipient address was David's. And the item? A high-end gaming console. My mind reeled. Had I accidentally left my debit card somewhere? Then a chilling memory surfaced. Weeks ago, David had asked me for my debit card details, claiming he needed to order something online for me because my internet was too slow and he could get a better deal. I, trusting as always, had given him the numbers, never imagining that he would use them for anything other than my own benefit. The gaming console was expensive, certainly more than I would spend on myself. He had simply stolen from me, a small, yet profoundly violating act of betrayal. This wasn't just a lapse in judgment, this was an exploitation of my trust, a calculated act of financial control under the guise of help. The incident with the debit card sent a cold shiver down my spine. It was a clear signal of their true intentions. They saw me not as a loving matriarch, but as a resource to be tapped, a convenient means to their ends. The feeling of being taken advantage of being used, curdled the remaining warmth in my heart. My mind, sharp despite my age, began to piece together a pattern. The missed birthday, the graduation exclusion, the increasing distance, and now this blatant theft. It wasn't random. It was a progression, a gradual pushing me out, a quiet dispossession of my space, my time, and now my money. Then came the conversation about the house. David called me one evening, his voice unusually strained, laced with a false cheerfulness that immediately put me on edge. "Mama, Maria, and I have been talking. This house, it's a lot for you, isn't it? All those stairs, the yard to maintain. We think it might be time for you to downsize." Downsize. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. My home. The place where I had raised David, where I had watched my grandchildren take their first steps, where every creak of the floorboards held a memory. "We've been looking at some lovely assisted living communities," he continued, rushing on before I could respond. "They have activities, nurses on staff, everything you could possibly need. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. Assisted living." The words hit me like a physical blow. They weren't suggesting I sell the house to move closer to them or to a smaller, more manageable place of my choosing. They were subtly, but unmistakably, pushing me into a nursing home. Me, Eliza May Johnson, who still cooked 3 meals a day, who tended her garden, who walked 2 miles every morning, who still kept her mind sharp with crosswords and books. They saw me as frail, as a burden, as someone whose autonomy needed to be curtailed for my own good. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. "David," I said, my voice dangerously low, "this is my home. I am perfectly capable of taking care of it, and myself. He sighed, a long-suffering sound that grated on my nerves. Mama, please be reasonable. We just want what's best for you. It's too big. And, honestly, it's a lot of money tied up in a house you don't really need anymore. My blood ran cold. Money. There it was. The thinly veiled truth behind their concern. They weren't worried about my well-being. They were worried about the equity in my home. They wanted my house. They wanted my independence. They wanted to control my finances, my life, my very existence. The realization was a bitter pill, difficult to swallow. This wasn't just an act of financial control. It was an attempted dispossession, a blatant move to strip me of my most significant asset and, by extension, my freedom. The fear, for the first time, was palpable. They weren't just neglecting me. They were actively trying to control me, to shape my future according to their desires, regardless of my own. The following weeks became a subtle siege. David and Maria started visiting more frequently, but their visits were less about connection and more about inspection. They'd eye the peeling paint on the porch, point out a loose shingle on the roof, subtly hinting at the burden of maintenance. Maria even brought brochures for the Golden Years residents, leaving them casually on my coffee table, their glossy pages depicting smiling, elderly faces engaged in lukewarm activities. Every conversation veered towards my future, always implying a future without my beloved home, a future under their care. Their words, cloaked in concern, were sharp thorns, pricking at my dignity. They were trying to wear me down, to make me believe I was incapable, that my independence was merely an illusion. The pressure was constant, suffocating. I felt like a bird trapped in a cage, the bars of which were being slowly, inexorably tightened by the very people who claimed to love me. The sense of betrayal escalated into a burning indignation, a quiet fury that solidified my resolve. I was Eliza May Johnson, and I would not be easily broken. The pressure from David and Maria escalated with each passing day. Their visits, now almost daily, felt less like family gatherings and more like inspections, each interaction punctuated by veiled suggestions about my declining capabilities and the increasing burden of my home. Mama, did you remember to take your vitamins this morning? Maria would ask, her voice dripping with an artificial sweetness that grated on my nerves. This house is so big for just one person. Don't you think it's time to consider something smaller, something more manageable? David would chime in, gesturing vaguely at the spacious living room, as if its very size was an affront. The brochures for the Golden Years residents became permanent fixtures on my coffee table, their glossy images of serene, inactive seniors a constant, infuriating reminder of their intentions. They spoke of activities and round-the-clock care, painting a picture of blissful idleness that, to me, felt like a gilded cage. My mind, however, was far from idle. While they were busy plotting my supposed future, my own thoughts were meticulously constructing a different path. The rage that had simmered after my birthday, the bitter sting of the gaming console theft, and now their blatant attempt to dispossess me of my home, had solidified into a cold, hard resolve. I was Eliza May Johnson, and I had built this life brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. I was not some fragile relic to be packed away and forgotten. I was a woman who had weathered storms, buried loved ones, and raised a family that now, ironically, sought to diminish me. But they had profoundly underestimated me. They saw an old woman. I saw a lifetime of unseen strength and quiet defiance. My days, which they imagined were spent in lonely reflection, were now filled with a secret, intense purpose. I began with methodical research. The internet, a tool they believed I barely understood, became my silent accomplice. I spent hours learning about property rights, trusts, and the intricacies of probate law. My fingers, though stiff, navigated websites with surprising dexterity, fueled by a renewed sense of urgency. I rediscovered an old safe deposit box, long forgotten, tucked away in the deepest recesses of my mind. It held papers, decades old, about an investment my late husband, bless his foresight, had made years ago, a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds, meticulously managed by a financial advisor whom I had completely forgotten about amidst the busy rhythm of raising David. The discovery was like a sudden, blinding ray of sunshine cutting through the oppressive gloom. This was not just a small nest egg, it was substantial. Enough, I realized with a surge of adrenaline, to rewrite their entire narrative. The next step was to meet with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one highly recommended for estate planning and elder law. I chose Mr. Davies, a man with kind eyes and a sharp mind, who listened intently as I recounted my story, his pen scratching quietly on his pad. I laid out my wishes, my intentions, my newfound resolve. He offered clear, concise advice, outlining options I hadn't even considered. He helped me draft a new, ironclad will, meticulously detailing every last wish, every precise instruction. The process was empowering, each clause a quiet act of defiance against the control they sought to exert. I also established a new, private bank account, one completely separate from the joint account David had access to, into which I transferred a significant portion of the funds from my rediscovered investments. This was my sanctuary, my ultimate tool of liberation. The final, crucial piece of my plan involved a seemingly innocuous social engagement. My neighborhood book club, a small but fiercely loyal group of women I had known for decades, was holding its annual summer garden party. Mrs. Gable, bless her nosy heart, was the self-proclaimed social queen of Maple Street. Anything that happened in the neighborhood, she knew. Anything that needed to be known, she made sure was known. This was my chosen stage. The day of the garden party arrived, a glorious summer afternoon. I dressed meticulously, choosing a vibrant floral dress that accentuated my still straight posture, a pearl necklace that had been my grandmother's, and my most comfortable, yet elegant, walking shoes. I arrived fashionably late, a slight smirk playing on my lips as I took in the scene. There, amidst the chatter and polite laughter, were David and Maria, who had apparently decided to grace the event with their presence, likely to maintain appearances, or perhaps to discreetly check in on their frail mother. They nodded curtly at me, a condescending half-smile on Maria's face, as if I were a distant relative they barely tolerated. The slight, though expected, still stung. But today, the sting would be brief. As Mrs. Gable, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair, began her customary welcoming remarks, her eyes twinkling with anticipation of neighborhood gossip, I knew my moment was approaching. She spoke of community, of enduring friendships, and then, with a flourish, turned to me. And of course, we must acknowledge our dear Eliza May, who just celebrated her 75th birthday. A true pillar of our community. A smattering of polite applause followed, but David and Maria merely offered strained smiles, their eyes darting away, clearly uncomfortable with the public acknowledgement of their neglect. I stood, steadying myself, my gaze sweeping across the familiar faces, finally resting on David and Maria, their forced smiles faltering under my direct gaze. "Thank you, dear Mrs. Gable," I began, my voice clear and strong, resonating with an authority I hadn't felt in years. "And thank you all for your kind wishes. Indeed, 75 years is a milestone. It's a time for reflection, for gratitude, and for decisive action." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. David and Maria exchanged nervous glances. "You know," I continued, my voice softening just slightly, "I've always believed in supporting family. In lending a hand, offering a home, sharing what little I have. It's the way I was raised, the values I hold dear." I paused, allowing my words to sink in. Just recently, I've had to reflect deeply on those values, on who truly embodies them, and who perhaps does not. My eyes fixed on David, whose face was slowly draining of color. For years, I've lived in my beloved home, a home filled with memories. A home that some, perhaps misguidedly, felt was too much for me. Too many stairs, too much upkeep. They even suggested I move into an assisted living facility for my own good. A collective gasp swept through the garden party attendees. Mrs. Gable's eyes were wide with a mixture of shock and sheer delight. And then I continued, my voice gaining strength. There was the matter of my finances. Certain unauthorized purchases made with my debit card for items I certainly did not request or need. Under the guise of help, of course. David flinched, his jaw tightening. Maria looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. The murmurs grew louder, turning into outright whispers of indignation. "But a birthday, you see," I said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips, "can be a moment of clarity. It reminds you of your true worth and of the true worth of those around you." It became abundantly clear to me who truly cares for Eliza May Johnson and who perhaps cares more for what Eliza May Johnson possesses. I took a deep breath, the air around me crackling with tension. And so, with a clear mind and a full heart, I have made some decisions. As of this week, I announced, my voice ringing out across the stunned silence of the garden, I have officially finalized the sale of this very house. A cacophony of gasps, exclamations, and shocked whispers erupted. David and Maria looked utterly stunned, their mouths agape. "Yes," I said, allowing a small, triumphant smile to bloom on my face. "This beloved home, too big and burdensome, as some suggested, has found a new owner. A wonderful young couple, just starting their family, who will fill it with new laughter and new memories. And as for me," I continued, ignoring the furious whispers and panicked glances exchanged between my son and daughter-in-law, "well, I have just completed the purchase of a lovely, spacious condominium. Not in an assisted living facility, mind you, but in a vibrant, independent community. A place where my autonomy is respected, where my wisdom is valued, and where I can live my life exactly as I choose, free from unsolicited help or guidance." The faces of David and Maria were now a mask of pure shock, mixed with a dawning horror. They had been so sure of their control, so convinced of my helplessness. "Furthermore," I added, my voice dropping slightly, but still carrying to every corner of the garden, "in my new, legally binding will, meticulously drafted with Mr. Davies, whom I've only just had the pleasure of meeting," I glanced pointedly at David, "I have ensured that my remaining assets, those which are truly mine, will go to those who have demonstrated genuine love, respect, and compassion towards me. Not those who have treated me as a burden, or worse, as a mere source of financial gain." The implication was clear, sharp, and utterly devastating. The stunned silence that followed was broken only by the chirping of cicadas and the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. David and Maria looked as if they had been struck by lightning. Their faces, once condescending, were now a horrifying mixture of disbelief, panic, and dawning realization. The inheritance they had so confidently counted on, the house they had seen as their due, had just vanished before their very eyes. They were left with absolutely nothing but the crushing weight of their own misdeeds, publicly exposed.